All right, so let's do something special now, everybody. Let's take a break. We're going to come back in just a minute, and we're going to share a short story. In fact, we might share two short stories with you. One from my friend, now passed away, William F. Nolan. As we go, we embark on a cold night, cold darkness here in southern Russia, Hampshire. For You Got It, a little excursion into Fiction Friday. It's time to open up the booktube channel and start talking about the Outer Limits and former Star Trek writing fellow as we do a little Outer Limits intro and we talk short stories from none other than William F. Nolan, who wrote for The Twilight Zone.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
All right. Well, let's talk about my buddy Bill Nolan, who died in 2021. William Nolan was an amazing guy, worked with a lot of great writers, great friends with, as I mentioned, George Clayton Johnson, and I became friends with George, who also was an anarchist like I am. And we had a great conversation at the Rod Serling weekend at Ithaca, George and I. And I had forgotten that George and Bill were co-writers on Logan's Run when I met George, and I was already friends with Bill. And Bill, for a long time, lived with my friend Jason and his wife over in near the Portland area, and they gave him a whole new career. Jason and Sonny Brock. B-R-O-C-K. Great people. Sonny is S-U-N-N-I. Jason Brock, great horror writer and wonderful documentary filmmaker. Jazz Sonny Productions. You might want to look them up. They've done cool stuff about Forey Ackerman, and they did something about, they've done stuff about Bill Nolan, all sorts of people. So very interesting folks. And Bill Nolan lived with them for quite a while towards the end of his life. Just a great guy. And there you can see William F. Nolan. He was best known as co-author with George Clayton Johnson of Logan's Run, a science fiction novel that went on to become a movie, and as single author of its sequels. His short stories were selected for scores of anthologies and textbooks, and he was twice winner of the Edgar Allan Poe Special Award for the Mystery Writers of America. And you can see he's got his Logan novels. Then there's Sam Space for Hire from 1971, Look Out for Space, 1985. It's got a number of novels, very cool stuff, and tons of collections. Now, this Kincaid story, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this was essentially going to be like a Night Stalker sort of a thing. And you might be familiar with the Norlis tapes. The Norlis tapes was something that Bill Nolan developed as an alternative to Kolchak, essentially. It was produced by Dan Curtis, actually. They did one TV movie. Angie Dickinson was in it, and Bill wrote the script for that. And essentially, the Kincaid character is like Kolchak, like Norlis, and he just didn't have the rights to do Norlis. I think it was held up by Universal or NBC or something. So he did that. And it's very interesting stuff. So Bill Nolan, he's got another, mysterious supernatural sleuth, as we often see with Karnacki and some of the other paranormal investigators, that sort of thing. So he was just my kind of guy, and he was a terrific guy. So I want to read you a short story. This from a collection, one of these great Barnes & Noble collections that you could have gotten for like $8 at Barnes & Noble. And by the way, I heard Barnes & Noble has changed its paradigm, and they're doing better. They're focusing more on regional writers and regional tastes, allowing the managers at the local stores to do a lot more of their own things rather than deciding things from top down on corporate, and their earnings are going up as well. So maybe we'll be seeing fewer of those fantasy romance things and stuff. Having worked at a bookstore, I know that the majority of book sales are to women, and they mostly have some sort of romantic thing in them. That's just the way that the industry is, and it's nothing to do with sexism. It's just the way that it is, there is always going to be the vast bulk of stuff that's in a bookstore is going to be set to appeal to women, and men have felt on the outs for quite a while. And in the alternative circles of independent writers, men have been able to access these writers on their own. So people who are interested in hard science fiction, in the engineering and the science of these things, mostly tend to be men. And if you look at writers, male and female writers tend to write differently as well. Men are much more plot driven and dynamic and faster paced. Women take a little more time. They're a little bit more introspective, and they concentrate on things in their descriptions, colors and other things much more than men do. It's just you'll notice it. You'll notice the difference. As I said, if you want to see a great example, look at Jonathan Kellerman's novels and Faye Kellerman's novels, and you'll see the difference between husband and wife team, both bestsellers. Jonathan's are very, very sparse, very fast moving, almost like James Patterson sort of a thing. And hers are much more lengthy in the description and the paragraphs and things like that. So I want to read to you, and there's so many good ones in here. This is one of those books, 100 Menacing Little Murder Stories, edited by the now sorely missed Robert Weinberg and Martin H. Greenberg. Marty Greenberg was sorely missed. I don't know if Robert Weinberg is gone, but Marty Greenberg passed away a couple years ago. So I want to give you this one, Death Double by William F. Nolan. And that will serve as our first little appetizer. And here we go. Bill Nolan, rest in peace, Bill. I got to get Jason and Sonny on. They're a lot of fun. All right, so... Oh, wow, they got a Donald Wandre story in here. Death Double by William F. Nolan on Fiction Friday. Welcome, and thank you for being here, by the way. Thank you very much. Clayton Weber eased himself down from the papier-mâché mountain and wiped the artificial sweat from his face. "How'd I look?" he asked the director. "Great," said Victor Radish. "Even Morell's own mother wouldn't know the difference." "That's what I like to hear," grinned Weber, seating himself at a makeup table. Thus far, Courage at Cougar Canyon, starring fearless Claude Morell as the Yellowstone Kid, had gone smoothly. Doubling for Morell, Weber had leaped chasms, been tossed from rolling wagons, dived into rivers, and otherwise subjected himself to the usual rigors of a movie stuntman. Now, as he removed his makeup, he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Morell would like to see you in his dressing room," a studio messenger boy told him. Inside the room, Weber lit a cigarette and settled back on the brown leather couch. Claude Morell, tall and frowning, stood facing him. "Weber, you're a nosy, rotten bastard, and I ought to have you thrown off the lot and blacklisted with every studio in town." "Then Linda told you about my call?" "Of course she did. Your imitation of my voice was quite excellent. Seems you do as well off camera as on. She was certain that I was talking, or she never would have discussed the abortion," finished Weber, feet propped on the couch. Morell's eyes hardened. "How much do you want to keep silent?" Morell seated himself at a dressing table and flipped open his checkbook. "Bribery won't be necessary," smiled Clayton Weber through the spiraling smoke of his cigarette. "I don't intend to spill the beans, to head a hopper. The fact that you impregnated the star of our picture and that she is about to have an abortion will never become public knowledge. You can depend on that. Morel looked confused. Then, I don't... Have you ever heard of the parallel universe theory? Morel shook his head, still puzzled. It's simply this. That next to our own universe, an infinite number of parallel universes exist, countless millions of them, each in many ways identical to this one. Yet the life pattern is different in each. Every variation of living is carried out with a separate universe for each variation. You follow me? Obviously, Morel did not. Well, let me cite examples, said Weber. In one of these parallel universes, Lincoln was never assassinated. In another, Columbus did not discover America, nor did Joe Louis become heavyweight champ. In one universe, America lost the First World War. But that's ridiculous, Morel said. Dream stuff. Let me approach it from another angle, persisted Weber. You've heard of doppelgangers. You mean, doubles? Not simply doubles. They are exact duplicates. Weber drew on his cigarette, allowing his words to take effect. The reason you never see two of them together for comparison is that one of them always knows he is a duplicate of the other and stays out of the other's life, or enters it wearing a disguise. You're talking gibberish, said Claude Morel. Bear with me. The true doppelganger knows he is not of this universe, and he chooses to stay away from his duplicate because it is too painful for him to see his own life being lived by another man, to see his wife and children and know they can never be his. So he builds a new life for himself in another part of the world. I don't see your point, Weber. What are you telling me? Clayton Weber smiled. You'll see my point soon enough, he continued. Sometimes a man or woman will simply vanish, wink out, as it were without a trace. Ambrose Bierce, the writer, was one of these. Then there was the crew of the Marie Celeste. They unknowingly reached a point in time and space that allowed them to step through into a separate world. And it was like ours, and yet totally unlike ours. They must have become doppelgangers. Weber paused, his eyes intent on Morel. I'm one of them, he said. It happened to me as it happened to them, without any warning. One moment, I was happily married with a beautiful wife and a baby girl, and next I found myself in the middle of Los Angeles. Sometimes it's impossible to adjust to this situation. Some of us end up in an institution claiming we're other people. He smiled again. And of course we are. Morel stood up, replacing the checkbook in his coat. I don't know what kind of word game you're playing, Weber, but I've had enough of it. You refused my offer. All right, you are fired. And if a word of this affair with Linda Miller ever hits print, I'll not only see that you never work again in the industry, I'll also see that you receive the beating of your life. And I have the connections to guarantee a thorough job. Do one thing for me, Mr. Morel, asked Weber. Just hold out your right hand, palm up. I don't see... Please. Morel brought up his hand. Weber raised his own, placing it beside Morel's. Look at them, he said. Look at the shape of the thumbs, the lines on the palm, the whorls on each fingertip. Good God, said Claude Morel. The man who called himself Clayton Weber reached up and began to work on his face. The cheek lines were altered as he withdrew some inner padding. His nose became smaller, and he peeled away a thin layer of wax. In a moment, the change was complete. Incredible, Morrell breathed. That's my face. I had to look enough like you to get this job as your double, Weber told him, but of course I couldn't look exactly like you. Now, however, we are identical. He withdrew the Colt from the hip holster of his Western costume and aimed it at Morrell. No blanks this time, he said. But why kill me? Morrell backed to the wall. Even if all you said is true, why kill me? They'll send you to the gas chamber. You'll die with me. Wrong, grinned Weber. The death will be listed as a suicide. A note will be found on the dresser in the apartment I rented, stating Clayton Weber's intention to do away with himself, that he felt... Clayton Weber's intention to do away with himself, that he felt he'd always be a failure, nothing but a stuntman, while others became stars. It drove him. Of course, it will make excellent sense to the police. I will report that you shot yourself in my presence, as we discussed the career you could never have. But my face will be the face of Claude Morrell, not Clayton Weber. Half of your face will be disposed of by the bullet at such close range. There will be no question of identity. And we're both wearing the same costume. Morrell leaned forward, eyes desperate. But why? Why? I'm killing you for what you did to my wife, said Weber, holding the gun steady. But I never met your wife. In your world, this world, Linda Miller was just another number on your sexual hit parade. But in my world, she was my wife. In my world, that baby girl she carries in her body was born, allowed to live. And that's just the way it's going to happen now. If you'd married Linda, I would have disappeared, gone to live in another city, left you alone. But you didn't. So I'll marry her. Again. Claude Morrell chose that moment to spring for the gun, but the bullet from the big Colt sent his head flying into bright red pieces. The man who had called himself Clayton Weber placed the smoking gun in Morrell's dead hand. And that is from William F. Nolan, Death Double, from a collection called 100 Menacing Little Murder Stories, put out by Barnes & Noble. I hope you liked that one. I thought that was a lot of fun. Great stuff. Now, I'm going to reread for you the segment that I read day before yesterday on Wednesday. And before I do that, I want to read you a bit of some poetry here. Over at my Substack, one of the early paid pay break things was some poetry that I wrote that I think you might dig. Let me see if I can find it here. I should be able to find it. And yeah, so I'm going to go over here. It's in the poet. I think there's a section that's got the poem here. And it's one of the earliest inputs at my Substack. So let's go over here, see if I can find it. And well, there's a lot. Let's see here. I'll see if I can dig it up. I don't know. We'll see. I'll see if I can dig it up. Hopefully I can. Let me see if I can find it under poetry. I don't know. Well, maybe. Let me just do this. See if I can find it. Just take a second here. Poem. No. Yeah, maybe I'll have to look for it later. But, oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, I got it. Okay. So this is a poem that I wrote in 2022, published it on June 4th. And this is Lord Dunsany style poetry for Saturday, I said. And then you can see some very interesting artwork that I found somewhere in Creative Commons. I don't know what it was. It's called Enchantment. So this is from June 3rd, 2022. And the moonlit mist, it drew me up and through those double doors, through the latches and the locks, and the grass was soft beneath me, and the dew, it came right off. The moon burned in ashes up above me, both cold and bitter hot to touch. It shone on shoulder and on archway. Through it, I was asked to walk. Through it, I was asked to walk. Ivory, milky, ancient ivy, its boulders long since turned to dust, and fathoms silent wrapping round us, turning iron into rust. And the mist-filled basin, cauldron, curtain, came arising, up to breathe and piercingly to stare, as I walked past flagstone onto something I was not sure was there. I was not sure was there. And the curtain hid a face behind it, some presence old and wise and fair, and the moonlight tore apart the cotton, a wall of towers, arbor, and despair. Towers of despair. For that mist, it simply was illusion. The illusion coaxes and it leads. It calls us up from that fine slumber to the towers, dark as weeds. To the towers darkening deeds. So that's a little something in honor of Lord Dunsany, and it is called Enchantment from 2022. So that'll be in a book sometime. I don't know. But let me give you the last bit about the science fiction guys. Again, this is a story called Fuel that I've been working on, and I want to reread this one in case I did a crappy job on Wednesday. This is a science fiction story. This is going to be a short one. So, Fuel. I've seen things on this journey, things I never imagined, things I never will forget. Here, swimming through the depthless cold of space, I've been blessed. Through life-protecting plexi, densely packed, my cornea have absorbed the most dazzling and most subtle dances of light, the most breathtaking creations of God. Human eyes, likewise God created, witnessing the once invisible, once unattainable creations in the sky. The jagged, frozen wastes of the belt, the broad clouds of particles murmuring like space starling in the wake of our advance. The splintered sunlight rising and reaching through spokes of misty, deadly, ice-bouldered rings, refracting, defraying, orange, vermilion, and rose, past Neptune and across Saturn's eye. Oil, gold, laid out in 3 infinite dimensions, the most precious of gifts. And yet I knew from day one that I was not cut out for this space, this place, where suits are helmeted and fueled and heated and cooled, guarding against the stark reality that surrounds this tiny can of rivets and rust, this space that would freeze or blow out our veins in seconds. I miss the rain. I miss the natural flow of air. Even a slight breeze, something random and unexpected would do. But here, all is artificial sameness, grounded in steely silence, and in the unnatural silence lurking ever long beyond the shell that our engines propel, between the roids and across the void. I realized this early as I assimilated the first seconds, minutes, and artificial days aboard the ship. But I suppose I suspected as much in the weeks prior, when I summoned my resolve and bit that proverbial bullet and decided, for money's sake, to put my feet aboard that radiomonic bullet and make a little dosh to get back on my proverbial feet. Johnson? Well, I early could sense that he was a different sort. In the grand family tree of man, his branch and mine had taken altogether different paths. One might never know when and never fathom where, but he was quite a different breed. For Johnson, the wanderlust was fuel, and scientific curiosity the mental meal. I couldn't understand, even as we met and hammered out our roles as pilot and co, why he didn't feel his teeth going on edge just thinking about the fact that we were trapped, sealed in a composite of compartments that were surrounded by an ocean of death. If the overworked, underworldly engineers had screwed up, if the calculators had miscalculated by the tiniest fraction of a millimeter as we navigated, if one of the air systems went down or the heat decided to give us the cold shoulder, well, that was it. Slow, dissipating, crushing, icy breath. Slow, dissipating, crushing, icy death as we became one with the surrounds of space. And if the rockets got too hot, if our radioactive coal furnace threw off more energy than the Chaipov shielding and our special meds could repel or convert, we'd have to spangle our shortened lives with a lot more glitter and buy our carbonized caskets early to well prepare. How other people could not feel these feelings or think these thoughts virtually every moment one accelerated, adjusted, awoke to the phony photons inside the rubber-belted tube or checked the screens and fuel, I just couldn't understand. But Johnson and I, we were different. And in a way, I suppose that was good, because without his seeming nonchalance, the chalice of our mineral winnings would not have been sufficient for me to last that single strident space job I had decided to take from Pluto to Earth. So you can imagine my surprise and sense of unease upon seeing his furrowed brow and hawk-like stare, focusing on the nav, as if he were staring into a confounding abyss, when I climbed into the bridge circle. "What's up?" He shook his head, turned to the right of the screen, scanned a second, smaller display, gaudily showing a set of scrolling digits that ended in something red, and hovered over it, evidently unaware of the fact that his usual avian features now glowed like the face of Mars, bringer of war. "It's an anomaly, I think. Something's pretty damn close to our path, according to the multiplier. About," he glanced back at the visualizer, then at the digits, "about 6 C-clicks. Damn, are you kidding me? It wasn't noted by the nav rammers when they plotted the course?" Johnson just shook his head. "Jeez." After a moment's study and what seemed like a dive into imaginary contemplation, he straightened in his swivel chair and put his hands on either side of the first screen, tilting his head up towards the air ducts. "It could be something new. Shrapnel after an asteroid collision that shot out along a new vector. But whatever it is, it's too close to our path to risk it. Damn, man, a reroute." His sharp eyes fixed on the screen as if it were an insult, and he pulled one side of his thin lips. "At least we have time to change course. But you know how it is. When even a slight correction becomes part of the path, one decision leads to another, especially this close to the belt. Damn it!" I sunk my butt into the co-seat beside him and strapped in. I'll set about the changes if you're cool with notifying the chain about this new object, he said. Can do, I replied, with a bit of whimsy swirled into my anger frap. Okay if I add some expletives for their binary delivery? Sometimes our differences weren't so different after all. Be my guest, Shakespeare, he said. So there you go. Little something called Fuel for 2026. That'll be the new one. And I think it's going to be cool. Fuel will be cool. Like Duel. That's part of the reason I'm calling it that. In little honor of Richard Matheson. Good stuff. Well, everybody, I better get going. I hope everything is going great, one and all.